Knox County students. I'm Sarah Lyle and I teach 8th grade language arts at Vine Middle Magnet School. Today's lesson is based on task 4 for grade 8 ELA. If you don't have this assignment, it can be found by visiting the KCS website at knoxschools.org. Just click on CL Resources under the KCS at Home logo. Please be sure to complete this entire week's task before watching this video. As I said, if you haven't completed KCS at Home Summer Edition, Task 4 for Grade 8, please stop now and pause this video and return to it once you have finished so that we can go over the work together. Okay, let's get started. I just want to remind you of a few things. If you are able, and if you think it would be helpful, turn on the closed captions. Also, you can adjust the playback speed to slow down this video. Consider watching it in short clips, pause it, listen, and then watch again if you think that would be helpful. And then finally, if there's someone available at home to watch this video with you, stop frequently and talk to them about what you have heard and understood. Just a reminder that we have been encouraging you to annotate the text. These are some strategies that we have shared with you previously, like underlining important ideas, circling words that you don't know, using question marks in the margins to help to write questions or to take note of places where maybe you had a question. And then of course, there are a long list of other annotation symbols that you could use. Maybe your teacher even taught you a strategy this year that you're comfortable with, and you should feel free to use that strategy if you like. Today, you're gonna see in my annotations that I have used circling, underlining, and highlighting to engage with the text. So we have a few learning targets for today. The first thing is that we are going to analyze the effects of humorous elements in text. You're also going to draft and revise an essay analyzing a humorous text once this lesson has ended, if you haven't already attempted to do so. This task asks you to do multiple things, and I'm going to focus on just a few of them. And one of the things is identifying the parts of an essay and then revising a sample student essay. So the first thing that you're going to see here is this chart that asks you to choose 3 texts that you have previously read. And that might be a text that you read during the regular school year KCS at Home materials, or it might be something you've read in the last few weeks of the summer edition of KCS at Home. In any case, since there were so many texts, I did not do this for you because all of you out there watching might have chosen different texts. But what you wanted to do was to look at those 3 texts and try to identify the comedic effects, as well as to pull out some specific text evidence to show that you understand that comedic effect. So if you have not done that, I would encourage you to do that. And if you have and you just aren't sure or you're not confident with the work you did, please feel free to reach out to your teacher for support. So moving along here, this graphic organizer I did do, and I want to talk to you about just a little bit. You might have chosen a different text than me, and that is okay, but I chose the Dave Barry text from week 1 of the summer edition of KCS at Home, which is called I've Got a Few Pet Peeves About Sea Creatures. And the goal here is to analyze a text and just really dig into those humorous elements. And so I'm going to share my work with you. You can take a look at what you did and see if what you recorded is sort of in line with what I've recorded. And once again, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out or talk to someone at home and see what they think about the work you've done. So the Dave Barry text was an example of high comedy, so far as the level of comedy. And to explain that further, it's an example of high comedy because the text focuses on people and ideas. And so far as evidence to support my explanation, the author focuses on the issue of keeping a pet alive from a parent's point of view. He uses humor to show how complex it can be to make a child happy. Now, in the Dave Barry text, he uses two different humorous elements to create a humorous effect. So first he uses hyperbole, and an example from the text you can see here is loving care and feeding thrived for maybe 9 seconds before expiring like a little 6-legged parking meter. You might notice that there's also a simile in there, but the simile is not what creates the humorous effect. It's the hyperbole or the exaggeration. So an explanation of that is he exaggerates the time frame to show how ridiculous it is to have a beetle for a pet. So by making the comparison between the beetle and referencing having just 9 seconds, it creates a hyperbole, which is kind of funny. Then another thing Dave Barry does is he uses irony and sarcasm. And I know some of you are great at irony and sarcasm. So hopefully this one will resonate with you. An example from the text is, it was a month containing the letter R. So the irony there, of course, is that nearly all of the months contain the letter R. So he uses this to show how impossible trying to find a perfect fish could be for a parent. And then finally, we looked at the universal truth, which is the theme. And in the Dave Barry text, the theme was that parents will go through many obstacles to help their children. Evidence from the text, the author tries to find a pet that can be easily replaced due to his own experiences with a pet as a child. He explains several issues he encounters in trying to find a pet that will make his child happy. So again, this is the universal truth or message or theme that is conveyed through the comedy Dave Barry uses in his text. I've got a few pet peeves about sea creatures. Okay, so whether you chose to analyze the same text or a different text, hopefully you can see the connections between the level of comedy, the evidence, and then the humorous effects that the author used to convey the humor. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is a student essay that was written about the Dave Barry text, and that is the essay that you can find here in the week 4 task. So we're going to read that together, and then we are going to analyze this sample essay for several different elements. There's a fairly long list here. I am going to focus on those structural elements of the hook, the thesis, the topic sentences, the text evidence, some of the transitions, and then the universal truth or theme. And as well, we'll make reference to some of the humorous effects as we go through it. Okay, so it gives some suggestions here for how to annotate or engage with the text. And I did use some of these suggestions, but not all. And you will see how I engaged with the text, and however you engaged with the text is perfectly fine as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read, and you can just follow along. I'm going to keep my cursor down here in the margin so that you can see where I'm at while I'm reading. All right, The Power of Pets by Isha Sharma, an 8th grade student, just like you. Every child has gone through a phase in life when they have a sudden fixation with getting a pet, and parents often have to go through a lot of trouble in order to appease the child, at least until the obsession is replaced with another. In the lighthearted essay, I've Got a Few Pet Peeves About Sea Creatures, Dave Barry uses hyperbole and verbal irony to show how a parent will often go through great lengths to satisfy his child, often hoping that the child will learn something in the process. To point out the often ridiculous experiences parents go through for their children, Barry uses hyperbole to emphasize how complicated getting a pet fish can be. For example, he explains first how a pet beetle, under his daughter's loving care and feeding, thrived for maybe 9 seconds before expiring like a little six-legged parking meter. The additional use of simile and the exaggerated amount of time adds to the humor, as in any case, one's loving care and feeding should not cause the death of anything so quickly, no matter how terrible the care could actually be. The explanation of the parents replacing each beetle with another shows how willing parents are to support their children, no matter how ridiculous the circumstances. Furthermore, Barry calls the fish he bought so nonviolent that in the wild, worms routinely beat them up and steal their lunch money. As known to all people, it is fish that eat worms and not the other way around. This is hyperbolic because worms are not known for beating fish up, and animals do not have money, lunch money included. This also ties back to a metaphor analogy Barry made that an aquarium is a powder keg that can explode in deadly violence at any moment, just like junior high. Both of these situations are highly exaggerated. Through the use of hyperbole, Barry is able to convey how parents often feel about their struggle, even in simple situations, to which a child might react to them as being overdramatic. Also, Barry uses verbal irony, sarcasm to vent and display his frustrations, which proves furthermore the lengths he is going to help his daughter. For instance, when complaining about the aggressive nature of fish, he says they could become aggressive if it was a month containing the letter R, or they heard the song, Who Let the Dogs Out? Months and songs are all aspects of human life. It is unlikely that fish will ever have fish months or fish songs. This adds to the sarcastic tone of the writer, which shows that even through his frustrations, he is struggling to find the right choice for his daughter, no matter how much of a nuisance it is to make it. Also, Barry uses sarcasm when explaining the variety of needs for a fish tank so that the fish would be intellectually stimulated and get into a decent college. The author, as with most intellectual people, knows that fish do not have colleges, and seeing that their intelligence capacity is smaller than a human's, they cannot be intellectually stimulated. The author uses this verbal irony to point out that even though the needs of a fish are not as significant as the needs of a human, caring for them still requires a lot of effort. Clearly, the author chooses to go through this effort for his daughter. The usage of verbal irony in this piece further points out the struggles of a father to appease his child. Even in the most trivial instances, the parent will go through many obstacles to help his child, often in the hope that the child will learn something along the way. Whether or not the child actually learns this is questionable, yet the parent's efforts should not go unnoticed. Okay, so hopefully you had previously read the Dave Barry text, as well as this student essay, so that you have the background knowledge to build on what was written as we analyze the text. So there are several steps here in working through engaging with the text, but once again, I'm going to focus on looking at the structural elements of the essay, so that when it's your turn to write, you have that structural knowledge, that you kind of remember those things, that maybe it's been a while that you have looked at the structure of an essay. So this is a good review for you. All right, so I think the first thing I'm going to do is just go back up so you can see my annotations, and then I will come down here and review the notes that I took as well. All right, so the first thing I want to mention is the hook. You probably know that the hook is the first sentence in that first paragraph, and that its purpose, of course, is to just engage the reader and get them interested in the essay. So the hook here says, every child has gone through a phase in life when they have a sudden fixation with getting a pet, and parents often have to go through a lot of trouble in order to appease the child, at least until the obsession is replaced with another. Now, you might have learned that there are a variety of ways to write a hook. In this case, this writer uses sort of an anecdote, okay, a little relatable story or tidbit that most people could relate to, either having gone through a phase where they wanted a pet or maybe knowing someone who has desperately wanted a pet. So that is the hook. When you read that, you probably can relate to it in some way. And so that might get you interested in reading the rest of the essay. Okay. I tried to circle here for you the thesis statement. You'll notice in between the hook and the thesis, there's a little bit of context or background information where the student refers to the original text by Dave Barry. But then they get into the actual thesis statement, which is Dave Barry uses hyperbole and verbal irony to show how a parent will often go through great lengths to satisfy his child, often hoping that the child will learn something in the process. So the next thing that we're going to look at are the topic sentences in the body paragraphs. And what I really want you to pay attention to is how the two topic sentences, okay, here highlighted in green at the beginning of paragraph 2 and the beginning of paragraph 3, directly relate back to this thesis statement. Okay, so it's important to remember that the thesis statement is like a roadmap to the rest of the essay so that the reader, so that it's organized in a way that makes sense to the reader. So the thesis statement mentions hyperbole and verbal irony as the effects that Barry uses. So you should see hyperbole and verbal irony mentioned in the topic statements in the body paragraphs. So if you look at the topic sentence for paragraph 2, you're going to see that this writer refers to the hyperbole, which is the first thing that they mention in the thesis statement. So they say, to point out the often ridiculous experiences parents go through for their children, Barry uses hyperbole to emphasize how complicated getting a fish can be. Okay, so that is good organization because they mention hyperbole in the thesis statement, and then they mention hyperbole in the first topic sentence. Okay, just to keep in line with talking about the thesis and topic sentences, I'm going to scoot down here to paragraph 3. And here we should see the student refer to verbal irony, since that was the second thing that they mentioned in the thesis statement. And here they do indeed mention Barry's use of verbal irony to vent and display his frustration, which proves furthermore the lengths he is going to help his daughter. Okay, so once again, this is great organization and alignment between the thesis statement and the two topic sentences at the beginning of each body paragraph. The next thing that I want to point out are the examples of text evidence. And just to look at it visually, you can see I highlighted it here in this blue. And I want you to notice that each body paragraph has multiple examples of text evidence from the original text that the student is referencing. So in body paragraph 1, they integrate 3 different pieces of text evidence. All 3 of them are in direct quotes instead of paraphrased, with appropriate transitions to reference the text. Okay, so you'll notice transition words like, for example, he explains, furthermore, Barry calls the fish. So there's those transitions so that you know specifically that these are pieces of text evidence from the original text. Okay, so 3 here, and then in the next body paragraph, there are 2 pieces of text evidence. So I want you to take note of that. More text evidence is often better when you are writing an essay and trying to prove your thesis. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to read the examples of text evidence with you. Just notice once again that there are some transitions, he explains, there are direct quotes, and then in some cases there is a number in parentheses after the text evidence to show the specific paragraph or line in the text from which this writer got the evidence. The last thing I want to look at is the theme or universal truth, which is found here in the conclusion. And this writer mentions it in the first sentence of their short conclusion statement. They say, even in the most trivial instances, the parent will go through many obstacles to help his child, often in the hope that that child will learn something along the way. So even though that is specific to this essay, it is also a universal truth. Parents will go through many obstacles to help their children. And that can be applied to other texts or just life in general. I want you to notice how the student writer also uses an element of humor here. They say whether or not the child actually learns this is questionable, okay, which is very in line with the type of humor that Dave Barry used, which is sarcasm. And I bet you all would be great at integrating sarcasm into your writing about humor as well. Okay, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but if you look here, I've actually written out the hook, the thesis, the topic statements, and the universal truth that I highlighted in the text. So it's good to highlight it and engage with the text, but it can also be good to take note of that in writing so that you really just sort of solidify your understanding of those elements, okay? Now, there are multiple other suggestions here of things that you could do to engage with this student essay to help you better understand those comedic and humorous elements as you prepare to do your own writing. So let me just talk for a minute about some of the different suggestions. One of them is to use this outline right here, okay, to write a one-paragraph summary of the essay. Now, what would be the purpose of doing this? Once again, this just helps you better understand and absorb the structure and the content of what you just read, okay? So when you write a summary and you use evidence from the text and then put it in your own words, that helps you really absorb and take in that knowledge, okay? And in doing that, you would make sure that you had a central idea, a thesis, a main idea, all of those things in your summary of the original text. It's obviously going to be a lot shorter. The original text was 4 paragraphs. Yours would just be 1 short paragraph. All right. Something else you might do is if when you are annotating you had questions, you might go back to those questions and then create some revision suggestions for each one. So if you, I'm going to scroll back up here so you can see. If you took advantage of this note section, okay, and if you put some question marks here in the margins about things you were unsure of, this would be an opportunity for you to engage with those questions about the text. All right, you may also revise the essay, okay? Similar to how you might do peer editing in the classroom with your friends. You might go through the essay and make some suggestions about the hook or the thesis or the evidence or the conclusion. You might want to expand on that conclusion paragraph, which was only 2 sentences, okay? So before you write your own essay, it may be good for you to engage a little bit more with the student essay by giving feedback the same way that you would in your classroom before you completed your own writing. Right? You might go through the student essay and add in some headings that help to organize it better, maybe little subheadings for each paragraph, or charts and tables, maybe some graphics to help, like some illustrations to enhance the impact of the essay. All right, and then finally, after you have maybe like revised and given some suggestions for the essay, you might go in and actually revise for those conventions or sentence level errors. Okay, so maybe look for their verb tense or their punctuation, maybe their subject-verb agreement, and maybe make some revisions there. Okay, so that's a lot to ask and that's a lot of work, but the more that you engage with text, either by, analyzing it, revising it, giving feedback. I know that it's kind of difficult to give feedback when you don't have somebody there to engage with, but maybe you could have this conversation with somebody at home. The better prepared you are going to be to write your own essay using these same structural elements, as well as your ability to talk proficiently, write proficiently about humorous effects. All right, Let's scroll on down here for a second. So this is your actual task, which we're obviously not going to sit here and do together. But if you have not yet, the assignment is for you to write an essay that explains how an author creates humor for effect and uses it to communicate a universal truth. All right, so very similar to the essay that you just read, you would choose another text that you have read over the past couple of months and write an essay explaining how that author creates humor. You will not do the Dave Barry text that we just talked about. You will choose a different text if you haven't already done this. Notice the word explain, okay? So that should be a clue to you that you will be writing an explanatory or informational essay, not a narrative or persuasive. So that's your clue word there. And then it gives you a template here to help you plan, pre-write, draft, evaluate, revise, all of that good stuff. Maybe once again, you have somebody at home who can support you in this work. And once again, if not, feel free to reach out to your teacher for some support. Once you have written your essay, you want to reflect, okay, about your understanding of humor and how it was developed over the course of this unit. Has it impacted your sense of humor? Do you understand your sense of humor better? And then also just be thinking about also your understanding of the structural elements of writing an essay. Here is the rubric, which is similar, I am sure, to the writing rubrics that your teachers have used in class. And just be keeping this in mind as you write your essay, and maybe if you are able to give your essay to somebody else to read, ask them to look over this scoring criteria to give you some feedback. All right, so you'll be looking at the actual ideas, the structure, and then the use of language. And then it goes through to tell you what would be exemplary writing versus what would be proficient, emerging, and incomplete. And obviously you would like for your writing to score somewhere up here in the proficient exemplary range. Okay, so let me just go back over here for you. Once again, this was task 4 for the KCS at Home Summer Edition. I hope that you have enjoyed reading all of the humorous text over the last few weeks and months, that you have built some knowledge about humor in writing, that you have worked to become a more proficient writer. And I just hope you really are having a great summer. Your teachers miss you. I miss my Golden Bears, and we look forward to seeing you all back in your school, hopefully soon. Bye-bye.